What if the most powerful word ever spoken by Jesus was never truly translated? What if everything you were taught about prayer began from a misunderstanding? There is one word, preserved in Aramaic, that holds a deeper meaning than Father. That word is a Bwoon, and it changes everything. What if the most powerful word ever spoken by Jesus was never truly translated? What if everything you were taught about prayer began from a misunderstanding? There is one word, preserved in Aramaic, that holds a deeper meaning than Father. That word is a Bwoon, and it changes everything. The teachings of Jesus were never meant to be distant or symbolic in the way they are often presented today. They were direct, experiential, and deeply rooted in the language he actually spoke. Aramaic was not just a tool of communication, it was a living language filled with layers of meaning, vibration, and intention. When Jesus spoke, people did not just hear words, they experienced them. This is especially important when we look at the beginning of what is now called the Lord's Prayer. In modern translations, the prayer begins with Our Father, a phrase that feels familiar but limited. It creates an image of separation, as if the divine is something external, distant, and hierarchical. But this was not the original intention. The word used by Jesus was Abwoon, and it carries a completely different dimension of meaning. It does not point outward. It points inward and beyond at the same time. The people who first heard Jesus speak this word would not have interpreted it as a figure in the sky. Instead, they understood it as a source, an origin, a field of life that flows through everything. Abwoon is not a title. It is a state of awareness. It describes the divine as both intimate and infinite, present within and surrounding all existence. This changes the entire foundation of how the teaching is received. If the first word already establishes unity instead of separation, then everything that follows must be understood differently. The prayer is no longer a request directed outward, but an alignment with something already present within. And that shift is where the real power begins. To understand the power of Abwoon, it is necessary to move beyond translation and enter interpretation. Aramaic words often carry multiple meanings at once, and Abwoon is no exception. It can be understood as source, origin, divine breath, and even creative force. These meanings are not separate, they exist together, forming a complete concept that cannot be reduced to a single English word. When Jesus used Abwoon, he was not naming something outside of the listener. He was pointing to a reality that exists within and around them simultaneously. This is why the word feels expansive rather than restrictive. It invites awareness rather than obedience. It awakens recognition instead of reinforcing distance. This is also why the original listeners did not experience these teachings as religion. They experienced them as revelation. The word itself acted as a key, unlocking a perception that was already available but not yet activated. It was not about learning something new, but about remembering something deeper. Once this is understood, the structure of the prayer begins to shift. It is no longer a sequence of requests, but a progression of alignment. Each phrase builds upon the awareness initiated by Abwoon, guiding the listener into a state of clarity, presence, and connection. If these Gnostic teachings are awakening a desire for inner transformation within you, we prepared Dois Guides, the Sacred Words, where this journey begins. The link is pinned in the comments. There is a reason why the word Abwoon was placed at the very beginning of the teaching. It establishes the foundation for everything that follows. Without it, the rest of the message can easily be misunderstood. With it, the entire structure becomes clear. It is not about asking. It is about becoming aware. When Jesus spoke, he was not creating a system of belief. He was revealing a way of perceiving reality. The use of Abwoon was intentional. It directs attention inward, while also expanding it outward. It dissolves the illusion of separation and replaces it with a sense of unity. This is where the idea of inner power begins to take form. If the source is not external, then access to it is immediate. There is no distance to travel, no barrier to overcome. The only requirement is awareness, and that awareness is activated through recognition. The repetition of the word was not meant to create ritual, but to deepen perception. Each time it is spoken with understanding, it reinforces a connection that already exists. Over time, this connection becomes stable, and the individual begins to experience reality differently. This is why the original teachings of Jesus cannot be reduced to simple phrases. They are layered, intentional, and designed to be experienced rather than analyzed, and Abwoon is the entry point into that experience. As the understanding of Abwoon deepens, its practical implications begin to emerge. This is not a concept meant to remain abstract. It is something that directly affects how a person thinks, feels, and interacts with the world. When the sense of separation dissolves, fear begins to lose its foundation. Much of human anxiety comes from the belief that we are isolated, disconnected, and dependent on external conditions. But if the source of life is already within and around us, that belief starts to shift. The individual no longer sees themselves as separate from the flow of existence. Instead, they recognize themselves as part of it. This recognition changes behavior. Decisions become clearer, reactions become calmer, and perception becomes sharper. The mind is no longer dominated by scarcity or uncertainty. It begins to operate from a place of alignment. In TS state, the teachings of Jesus move from theory to practice. They are no longer something to be studied, but something to be lived. The word Abwoon becomes a reference point, a reminder of the connection that is always present. If this teaching is stirring something in your heart, and you wish to explore it further, we prepared Dois guides. That explains the first sacred words, where the journey begins. There are layers of meaning and the transformation they carry. The link is pinned in the comments. There is a subtle but important shift that happens when a person begins to internalize the meaning of Abwoon. The focus moves away from external validation and toward internal clarity. This does not mean ignoring the world, but engaging with it from a different state of awareness. When Jesus spoke these words, he was not offering comfort in the traditional sense. He was offering transformation. The comfort comes as a result of understanding, not as a substitute for it. This is why the teachings can feel challenging at first. They require a shift in perception. But once that shift begins, the effect is undeniable. The individual starts to experience a sense of stability that is not dependent on circumstances. This is what many traditions describe as inner authority. It is not control over others, but clarity within oneself. The word Abwoon becomes more than a concept. It becomes a lived experience. It shapes how reality is interpreted and how actions are taken. And over time it creates a consistency that is difficult to disrupt. This is not something that happens instantly. It develops through attention, repetition, and understanding. But the foundation is always the same. It begins with a single word, spoken with awareness. The teachings of Jesus were never meant to be distant or symbolic in a limited sense. They were meant to be experienced directly, through language that carried depth and intention. The word Abwoon is a clear example of this. It is not just a translation, it is an activation. When understood in its original context, it reveals a perspective that changes how reality is perceived. It removes distance, dissolves separation, and establishes connection. This is not a belief system. It is a shift in awareness. Visit Divine Light Academy, my site dedicated to bridging ancient spirituality and modern living. There you will find my advanced guides and a deep journey into Aramaic, the living language of the masters, designed to help you access states of deep resonance, clarity, and personal revelation. The link is pinned in the comments. Get ready. In the next video, I will reveal more sacred Aramaic words that unlock deeper spiritual understanding. Turn on notifications so you don't miss it. Right now, before you close this video, come to the comments and tell us, what did you feel, what shifted? We read every single response. And if this teaching found you today, subscribe to this channel. Every week we go deeper into the ancient frequency codes that were always meant to be yours.